Hi everybody, welcome to Leading for Life Stories Season 2. My name is Bob Judson and I'm your host for this podcast, and I'm absolutely delighted to have you here joining me. Thanks very much, and I really hope you enjoy what follows. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you've been enjoying some decent weather in what's supposed to be the summer, and it seems like this has actually been quite a summery week for once. I thought I'd talk about the subject of communication for a variety of reasons, but I think it's a really interesting topic to talk about, particularly communicating with some level of impact. And that impact, of course, can be positive or it can be negative. And so I think it's worth just having some time to think about how you communicate, what means you use to communicate, what you say when you do communicate, and how you actually kind of assess to yourself before you send something, what it is you're sending. Is it the right thing? Is it a conversation you're having as opposed to something you're sending in written form? All those kind of things, which I think are interesting areas to dwell on, because we live in a world now where everything happens in a hurry. Everyone's pretty much got a smartphone, and most people spend quite a lot of time on that or some other equivalent device. And they communicate a lot with that by text, by WhatsApp, by email, by voice note, by voice message, by telephone call. And that means that obviously there's a risk, I think, in today's world that we don't think as much about how we're communicating, what we're saying, and how that message is going to land as we perhaps would have done a few years ago, when communications means we're generally slower and you had time probably to think about it. I mean, the obvious example in days gone by would be if you'd actually had a handwritten letter or did a handwritten letter. You would think carefully about what you were going to write probably, and you may well have sat on that before you sent it in the first place, and once you'd sent it, it was going to take a little while before it got to its target anyway. So there wasn't the kind of haste, although clearly you could still write something and regret you put it in a letter when you sent it. I think it's something that everybody in certainly any kind of working environment needs to think more carefully about, because I just don't think necessarily people do. I think people are quite reactive sometimes, very quick to judge what someone else has written, quick to respond to what someone else has written. You see it obviously writ large in what happens on social media sometimes, particularly things like X, formerly Twitter, where the response that some people seem to attract to things that they put on that platform is quite extraordinary. I mean, it's the sort of thing that people they write stuff that I'm sure they would never ever dream of saying to someone's face. And they do it in haste, and sometimes then delete it, obviously, if they do really regret it or feel that, that perhaps was totally the wrong thing to say, or someone else advises them to do it. But it's still often out there and it's been captured, screenshotted, etc. And that makes life difficult if it's something that's gone pretty viral pretty quickly. So I think that's the purpose of my thematic conversation today, was just to try and put my own thoughts down a little bit on what I think about this. I've previously spoken about saying thank you and the importance of saying thank you, and I absolutely stand by all of that. I think it's a really important thing to do, and I think it's something that a lot of people do not do enough. And obviously, in-person thank yous or handwritten note thank yous are absolutely the best. But I mean, at the end of the day, you may not be able to do that. So an email or a video conversation or a phone call may be a good alternative if you have no other option. So I guess I'm not really talking about thank yous on this. I'm more talking about other general communication where you've often got an audience that is different to you, that will read what you have written or said or listen to what you've said in a different way to the way you intended it. And that can be very damaging. And it's very difficult then to put the toothpaste back in the tube and to turn around and kind of respond after the fact when you're on the back foot and you're wishing that you hadn't said or done something that has now gone out there. the worst examples for me are things like in haste email responses or in haste text responses, where actually you read it, you don't read it properly, you just think, right, I've got minutes for you to respond. I know, and particularly if it's something that's contentious or a bit difficult or a sensitive kind of area, then it's the world's worst thing, in my view, to just respond in a hurry. It's way better to turn around and respond. By all means, prepare your response, but then sit on it for a bit and think about it, even if that's a matter of minutes or hours or overnight or whatever. But do not respond in anger or impetuously to anything, whether it's an email or a voicemail or whatever it happens to be, that is likely to just inflame the situation further. I think that's one of the worst things that you can do. And you need to think about how you put your words together in response. And often, I think one of the things that I do regularly is I get other people to look at my my comms before I send something out. My wife is excellent at that. She has a very different approach to me with lots of things. Often, I sort of vent my frustration a bit when she does it, but she'll make some really good suggestions and good corrections to things that I've written, just to either soften the language, some cases tighten the language, some cases actually accentuate the language and make it tougher than I'd originally made it, or more normally it's less than that. But I think getting a sort of a proofreader, if you like, is a really good thing to do. I think it's also very, very important that you do take the time to think about what you're actually sending and when you are sending it. So if it's a work email and you're wanting to exhibit good work behaviors, just think about whether it's sensible to send it at a weekend or at midnight or whenever it happens to be that you're actually doing it. All the tools these days are clever. They'll let you set times for sending emails. So why don't you use those? If you know you're going to be sending something that actually doesn't matter, it's not urgent, it doesn't require people to respond, and it may even attract a negative response if you're sending something out over the weekend, then don't do it. Just send it on a Monday and set your system up to send that message on a Monday morning at 8:00 in the morning or whatever it is that actually suits you. Because I think you can often find with a lot of people these days that they feel under pressure to respond. It doesn't matter whether they're getting something from a more senior person or from a more junior person. Sometimes they will still react to it, and that's not necessarily helpful behavior. You want to be walking the talk, as they say, in terms of what you're actually saying, what values you're trying to uphold in terms of good work practices, good work-life balance, and so on. So don't do things like catch up with your emails at the weekend and send loads of stuff that requires other people to action it if you can possibly avoid it, because it's just not that helpful. I mean, I have to say I'm guilty of it myself. I think quite often, I work all sorts of strange hours when I'm, if I'm away facilitating things like that. I'll come back and I'm playing catch up. And often that'll mean at the weekend and things I'm doing stuff that is just catch up. And so often I am doing exactly what I'm telling you not to do. I send emails out to people and so on. But I think in retrospect, and it's probably going to be something I'm modifying myself in terms of my behavior, that if you don't need to do that, don't do it. Don't clutter up somebody else's weekend with your email just because you thought it was important to send it just then. Send it later. And the other thing it gives you an opportunity to do, particularly if it's something where you're responding to something that has angered you, frustrated you, or in any way is going to be contentious when it lands, then just think about how that message will be perhaps exacerbated in terms of a negative response if you send it at a really strange time. So if someone, they're just about to go to bed and they read an email from you that, is really quite negative and is asking a lot or is giving some bad news that they don't want to hear about, whatever it might be. It might be a promotion, it might be a salary, it might be whatever the sort of topic is. But you just don't want those kind of messages to hit people at the wrong time. So be very conscious of that. Know your people. Be aware that if someone's on leave or, on holiday, do you really want to send them emails at that stage that, they might well then think they've got a moral obligation to respond to? if you are one of those people that thinks it's a good idea to send emails to people on holiday, start thinking about yourself a bit harder, because that is really, in my view, not great leadership practice. I think you need to think about making sure your people, just as you yourself, get time away. And when you are taking time away, that doesn't mean don't look ever at anything that's coming in on your email or your social media or whatever else. But it means do think about whether or not you're actually going to respond to it, because you're setting an example as a leader, particularly. You're setting an example back to people that may be most unwelcome. If you're in the habit of responding to every email very quickly and clearing your inbox every day, and you're sunning yourself in the Maldives while you're doing that, then people will start to think that that is A, an acceptable behavior for them to do to others, and B, they probably will continue to plague you with things because they know that you're going to respond anyway. Actually challenging your own leadership when they do that, call them out on it. Turn around and say to them, look, I think you should take the time off, just enjoy it. I'm not going to send you stuff, and please don't look if I do send you anything. Just respond when I get back. If I really need you, I'll text you, phone call you, whatever it happens to be. Because I think that the messaging you can send is much more positive when you can actually send it at a time when someone's really in a good place, mental headspace, physical headspace to receive it. You don't want to be, Friday night at, just as you're tuning down for the weekend, to be receiving text message or WhatsApp or whatever that is, at least if nothing else, implying tasks that you should actually pick up and then go and do. You want quite reasonably to be looking forward to having some downtime ordinarily if you're heading into a traditional weekend. So your own style in terms of what you look at is important here as well. I mean, you can take a view that I'll continue. I personally check my messages. I check my email very regularly, but I often won't respond to something if it's weird out of hours time. I will wait till the next day. If I'm responding to something that I don't like and it's a difficult response that I've got to write, then I will often write something more or less immediately, but I will never, ever send it immediately. I will always sleep on it. And that time and again, that has been useful to me because I've got up the next morning, looked at what I've got in my drafts folder and that I was going to send, and actually, I'm thinking, wow, no, I'm really glad I didn't send that. I need to change this, and this, and just either soften it, tighten it, maybe even strengthen it sometimes. But your first response is often not the the ideal one or the correct one for what you do. Don't do stuff when you're really tired. If you're really tired, and it's the end of a very busy day, or you've just been doing something that's, you are physically fatigued, then do be careful about what you are sending and how you are sending stuff. Because if you're not careful, you will either make mistakes, which we'll come back to in just a second, or you'll actually completely miscommunicate your message. So I think if you want to communicate well, you need to be doing it when you're in the right frame of mind. You need to think about the right means of communication to be able to send the message you want to do. And you want to double, triple check the message before you send it. So you need to be obviously tightening it up from a grammatical point of view, from a spelling point of view, etc. I used to say a lot when I was working with people in the Air Force that one of the challenges sometimes is if people are lazy about the way they do their own proofreading, and they make spelling mistakes and they don't check those. And every piece of word processing software these days has got a pretty decent spell checker. So I know autocorrect can sometimes be annoying and it gets in the way, but before you send an email, before you send a text message, read what you have put and make sure to the best of your ability you are minimizing the amount of mistakes that you send. Because if you send a document to somebody that's riddled with mistakes, by the time they get to the third or fourth paragraph, they're probably not reading your message at all. They're just looking for the next mistake. And they're focusing on the mistakes and the grammatical errors, etc., more than they're actually focusing on your message. So to make your message land with impact, it needs to be well written, correctly laid out, decently formatted. So it's not in some microscopic font or in a giant font. It's not in capitals, so it looks like it's shouting. It's doing all the things that are socially normal, and which often some people forget about these days. And going back to the time, you need to think about when you actually send it for maximum impact. Often you might want something to be at the top of someone's inbox early in their day. So that's a good thing to do. And you can set up Outlook or whatever other platform you use to turn around and send a message so it's going to achieve exactly that purpose. Be conscious as well, as obviously everybody is these days, of junk filters and things like that. Very regularly you'll be sending an email that's gone to junk. So don't jump to judgment on that. If you sent someone something and they haven't responded and they're normally in the habit of responding, is that because something else has happened? The message has gone into the junk folder. They've actually accidentally deleted it. Whatever it happens to be, it's gone to the wrong address. And that's another interesting point on addresses. I mean, what I tend to do if I'm drafting something to reply that I definitely want to sleep on, one of the things I do is I strip the addresses out of the address line, so there is zero risk of me accidentally pressing send and the message going before I wanted it to. I also have my system set up so there's a delay on my send. So, with pretty much, doesn't work with every system I have, but with most things, if I'm pressing send on an email, I've got about 30 seconds to undo that send, because the amount of times that things like obvious things that everybody mistakes, that everybody makes, attachments, you'll send a document saying, please see attached, and actually you don't attach anything. So the next thing is you need to attach and send another email with an attachment on it. If you've got a delay on your send, you at least have a chance to then go, whoa, no, stop, undo stop that send, correct the email, send it before it actually goes. Because your professional standing in a work setting, or indeed your personal standing, is directly affected by this. If you constantly make mistakes in what you communicate, then people will start to form a view of you that you might not want them to have. And so you do need to think about, how can I do that in a way that is going to minimize that? So I'm communicating neatly, tidily, correctly, succinctly, not using three pages when 2 paragraphs would do. Very much thinking about the core content of your message. One of the things that I think is always a good trait to think about is, whether it's a physical presentation you're giving or a written document, is the beginning, the middle, and the end. Because if you don't begin well, people will be bored very quickly. If you don't end well, people will forget what you said. And actually, you obviously want the middle to have all the substance and all the meat in it. But you need it to be pithy, readable, understandable. Be careful about jargon. Too much jargon, very, very difficult to deal with in that sense. If people don't understand what you've written, they'll lose interest in it quite quickly. Acronyms are another one. Just because you have a set of acronyms that you readily use, unless you're really concretely sure that those are in use all the time in your organization, be very, very careful about assuming that everyone will know what you're talking about if you filled a document full of acronyms. The Air Force kind of service writing convention actually was quite a good one in that regard. What it used to say is, you introduced the first time you used something, put the thing in full with the acronym in brackets, whatever the letters variation was was for that. And then the next time you have introduced it now, so you can just use the acronym. That's okay. That's perfectly fine. What's not fine is just to assume that everyone will know what you're talking about when you send something with an acronym in it. So be conscious and careful about how you manage that, because it's a tricky area. And the bottom line, I think, is, for particularly, I'm talking about communication at distance in all of this. I mean, I think some of the time you can also be communicating on stage and doing a presentation, doing a talk of any sort, really, where don't forget that nobody else knows what you're going to say until you've actually said it. So be careful about just assuming that, I made a mistake straight away because that's my mistake and now I need to start again or whatever. Because actually, if you're giving a formal presentation, it may well be that nobody else has noticed that at all. And so be conscious, I guess, in all your forms of communication about how you are actually doing it. I think I'll talk more about this and probably separate it out into some separate chunks in a future versions of the podcast, because I do think this is an absolutely pivotal area that regrettably a lot of people get wrong a lot of the time. And therefore, if they communicate poorly, they may be the most lovely person, super individual, super capable, but actually their message gets lost and goes wrong. And that is highly regrettable. People need to think hard about how they actually land messages well with the right kind of impact all the time, and test it on other people as well. Particularly if you're going to send something out that is likely to be a bit contentious. So be very conscious of that whole thing, the message itself, the content of it, the grammatical correctness, the spelling mistakes, the timing of which you send it, the style in which you send it. When you text messages, be super, super careful about sending anything official in a text message. Who wants that? Who wants to be effectively, if you like, fired by WhatsApp? And you do hear it happening. You need more formal communication for certain things. So again, just be very, very aware of the kind of impact that you're going to have, and give it a bit of thought. It'll pay you some dividends, that's for sure. That's all I wanted to say this week. I'm going to keep this one reasonably short, and let you get back to to whatever it is you're doing subsequently. As ever, I really hope you've enjoyed this, found it useful, and I will certainly be in touch again very, very soon with another podcast coming up on a year very, very soon since I've been doing this. So all feedback gratefully received, and I'm ever so grateful as ever for anyone that gives me the time of day to listen to this. Thanks ever so much. Speak soon. Bye.